Today I will be reacting to Korean drama just between lovers, and I hope this will be an interesting opportunity for you to learn about mental health. I hope as well that with help of this drama and with my reaction, you're gonna be able to have a better sense of how some people they might be experiencing their day-to-day life, even 10 years or even more after the traumatic event had happened to them. This drama presents stories of two main characters, Mon-soo and Gang-do, who survived building collapse that has happened over 10 years ago. At the time when the building collapse happened, both characters, they were children or young teenagers, and now they're meeting for the second time when they're in their early 20s. This drama demonstrates consequences of such major traumatic event in someone's life on their mental health, but also for their families. And also what I really like about this drama, that it really nicely demonstrates that although there were different characters who were maybe trapped under the building, they still are experiencing the trauma in very different ways. Here we can see one of the main characters, Mon-soo, and she is a survivor of that building collapse. But now as a result of that, she's struggling with claustrophobia, means she has a fear of being in confined spaces. She's actually making any effort to avoid being, for instance, in elevators which are really small. And also what comes with that fear of being in small spaces is that sense of being trapped, and possibly that sense of being trapped she had at the time when she was stuck under this collapsed building. And also what I would say is that heavy breathing and heavy footsteps that she's taking and the way how she's holding on to the banister might not be only because she's really tired of going upstairs, but also it might be to do with elevated anxiety of being in this really tall building that to an extent might be reminding her of as well being trapped under this collapsed building. So here we have Gang-do, who's also one of the main characters and who's also a survivor of the building collapse. And also as a result of this horrific accident, he suffered a major leg injury. Until now, he's still suffering with some physical pain, and also he has a mark on his leg from that. Here, from what we can see, most likely Gang-do, he's suffering actually from post-traumatic stress disorder. In this scene, we can see that Gang-do, he's experiencing nightmare, which is one of the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. And as a result of the nightmare, he's sweating, he's trembling, and also he's starting to experience pain in his leg. And this is actually reality for many people who are experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder, or as we call it, PTSD. For Gang-do, the past is being replayed in his nightmare to an extent where he actually can feel the pain in his leg as he felt at the time of the accident. This is again a common symptom of post-traumatic stress disorder, where the past memories are being replayed in nightmares or flashbacks to an extent where people they can actually smell and hear and feel, whether it is physically or emotionally, the things that they could at the time when the trauma happened. In this scene, we can see that he's self-medicating because this medication is actually not being prescribed to him by a doctor. And this is again a reality for many people who are dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder. So at times when they feel really overwhelmed with symptoms, and if maybe they have no support from their friends or family, maybe the therapy service is also not provided to them, maybe they have no medication, so they then turn to self-medicating or using drugs, alcohol, self-harm, food, maybe they self-isolate, and they using all these really unhelpful behaviors to actually help them survive. Because dealing with such a difficult trauma symptoms, it is extremely difficult. So here we can see continuation from the previous scene. So Gang-do, he woken up from the nightmare, and then he went out and he spotted someone who's actually owning him money, and he started to shout and he started an argument with him. And obviously he has his own reasons to do so. But at the same time, we need to also acknowledge that he just woken up from a traumatic nightmare. And then as a result of that, his brain actually started to send signals to produce extra hormone, which is called adrenaline. So this adrenaline is being pumped into his bloodstream. Adrenaline, it is a stress hormone that actually activates for us the fight, flight, or freeze response in situations when there's emergency or some sort of crisis. In crisis situations, when levels of adrenaline are being elevated, we have higher chances of survival. So for instance, if you're walking back home late at night and suddenly you hear some noise behind you and you're suspecting that someone might be following you, the adrenaline kicks in, and then you are in that state, you are prepared to defend yourself or run for your life. And because of adrenaline, you have higher chances to actually run away from that person or defend yourself. And when someone is experiencing PTSD, these levels of adrenaline are constantly being triggered by, for instance, certain smells or certain images or nightmares or flashbacks, because the brain is oversensitive to certain smells, maybe certain images, certain people. And in those situations, the brain predicts that there's potential danger and then instantly releases the adrenaline, even the person is actually not in a crisis situation. As we can see in this scene, he's waking up from the nightmare. There's no real danger, but his adrenaline is elevated, and then he's looking for outlet of this extra energy that he's feeling. And maybe you can relate to that. Sometimes when you feel really anxious, you just feel something really like irritating you, and that's most likely is that extra adrenaline that's being trapped in your body. Because normally if there's a crisis situation, when you have to run, maybe you have to fight, then there's outlet for that adrenaline. The adrenaline can get out, you can utilize that. But in situations where maybe you sit on a sofa and suddenly you see something and something reminds you of the trauma and you experience the flashback, then nothing happens. You just sit there and this adrenaline stays in your body. And that's why people who experience high anxiety, who experience post-traumatic stress disorder, they also experience a lot of irritation, frustration, and it might be also to do with that the elevated level of adrenaline. Throughout this series, we can actually see that Kang-do, this character, he's getting into different fights and arguments with people. And it's not something that he's choosing consciously to do, but I guess it might be also to do with lack of awareness about his symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. And that's why it's really important to actually learn about PTSD. So then you actually know that in those certain situations, when you are being triggered, you feel all this irritation or you feel all these different things because, for instance, adrenaline. And then by having this awareness, it's actually much easier to take control and know, all right, so if that's what's happening, then what I can do instead of getting into arguments with people. Here we can see Kang-do again, who this time experienced a flashback, which is a very vivid memory of the traumatic event. Flashbacks are normally triggered by certain images, by seeing certain people, by smells, by certain sounds. Sometimes flashbacks, they can also be triggered by certain pains and sensations in our body, also by maybe the way we sit or lie down. And for some people, it might be very difficult to identify specific triggers. That's why they flashbacks, they might feel even more random. As we can see here, the flashback doesn't last very long, and that's actually quite common, but it has tremendous impact on the person. So here the past memory of Kang-do being trapped under the collapsed building is being replayed in his mind as if the trauma was happening again to him. So when we recall a normal memory, we have the full awareness that whatever we're thinking about happened in the past. However, when we have a trauma memory, which we call a flashback, it is a type of memory where for these few seconds we actually losing the conscious awareness that whatever we're recalling happened in the past. So there's no separation between here and there. So in this instance here, when he's experiencing the flashback, again, we can be expecting that his levels of adrenaline are really high, That means that his heart is racing, he's sweating, he's feeling really irritated, frustrated because of this excess of adrenaline being trapped in his body. His vision can be quite blurry, he might be having racing thoughts, and it might be really hard for him to actually concentrate and focus on what other people are saying to him. So here in the scene we can see Kang-do experiencing flashback again, where he's trying to save the other boy who's also trapped under the collapsed building. But because of his own injury, Kang-do is really struggling with helping the other person. But as a result of that, he's now struggling with the survival guilt. And survival guilt is also another aspect of PTSD that people very often they deal with, but it is not talked about enough. I think this drama did a really good job at describing how people who suffer major traumatic events are carrying on their life living with major anxiety disorders or PTSD, and how they kind of trying to live life now, but at the same time they are stuck in the past. So that will be it for today, and if you enjoyed this video then please like it, subscribe, and if you have suggestions of any other Korean dramas that I could review as a psychologist, then please leave me the suggestions in the comment section, and I'm gonna see you in the next one then. Thank you, bye bye.